First of all, thank you so much, Sue, for including me in this event today. I think events like this are really important, and I'm so glad that we get to come together and learn from each other and share. So, as Sue mentioned, we want to talk a little bit about difficult conversations. Does anybody here want to make more money? Come on, you all do. I was an HR director for like 15 years. I know all of you want more money. Okay, so we're not necessarily going to mysteriously solve that issue in my 12-minute talk, but what we are going to talk about is how to bring yourself to the table with more confidence so that you can be more successful in these conversations that are sometimes a little bit difficult. So we talk about pay rises, maybe how to talk to your manager about a promotion, how to successfully disagree with somebody, and how to, raise your voice when maybe you think that it's not going to be a super comfortable situation. So I think all of these things have one thing in common, and that's getting us out of our comfort zone. I know this has been true for me, that sometimes you think it's more comfortable to stay in your comfort zone. I have gone with that logic before and been sadly mistaken. So hopefully a couple of the examples I'll share with you today will help speed up your learning curve and save you a little bit of pain. The first example I'm going to share is when I was very early in my career, my boss said, I think you're ready for a promotion, there's an opening, why don't you go for it? So I knew that I wanted the job, and I was certainly skilled and qualified for it, so I went for it. And throughout the interview process, I was very demure and polite. You could call me Canadian at this point. And I just assumed, obviously, they knew how brilliant I was and how smart and capable and skilled I was going to be at rocking this new job. So, big surprise, the guy that I was up against got the job. Not because he was more skilled or more qualified, which he wasn't, but he was way better at showcasing his skills, lesser amounts of skills, than I was at showcasing my substantial skills. And for me, it was out of my comfort zone to sell myself or, put myself out there. So by staying in my comfort zone, didn't get to advance in my career, and there I am not in my comfort zone again. So how do we think about these situations and where we can start to approach this in a different way? When I think about that story as a business leader, I recognize that younger Jenny didn't just do a disservice to herself and her career, but to the entire team. As a business leader, I need the best people for the job, for the team. I need to know what you have to offer. I need to know what value you're bringing, because without that, I can't make an informed decision. Your boss, your team, your colleagues want to know the value that you're bringing. So keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out, should I mention it, should I share, should I bring it up? It's of value for other people to know this. So, an author that I really like, Susan Pivert, speaks about cultivating receptivity. So how does this relate to getting outside of our comfort zone? For me, it means being able to receive what's outside of our comfort zone when we do share. If we're not sharing, if we're not putting ourselves out there, we're not open to receiving what's next. So we like to keep this in mind, and we like to think about how it's not just good for us, but it's good for the other people as well. As I mentioned, your team, your clients, your boss. The next example I want to talk about is pay rises. Ooh, the good. So this example applies to when I did get a promotion to a senior role, and my manager said, we're not going to do a pay rise right now. Just do the job, we'll talk about it later. Don't worry about that kind of stuff. So it was not in my comfort zone to argue with the manager, and it wasn't in my comfort zone to be confrontational about these things. So I wasn't. And talking to this with my partner at home, I was quickly advanced into a whole new level of uncomfort in my comfort zone, because as a larger, louder person, he, in no certain terms, told me that I was just letting this guy take advantage of me. If I took on a job and I took on responsibilities and I took on all the things that came with it, and I didn't come to the table and negotiate for myself, who was I serving? I wasn't acting like a senior person in that. So by trying to be non-confrontational at work, I was in a confrontation at home. Again, sometimes staying in your comfort zone isn't a good idea. But what I thought about there is we have to figure out how to make it work for us. So, as I mentioned, being an HR director, being a business leader for a long time, I've been on the receiving end of zillions of pay rise increases. Probably from a couple of you who are here today. And if not, in my future, I'm sure some of you from here today. But you have to remember that just having the confidence to step up and ask for something doesn't mean you're going to get it. You need to be really prepared, and you need to think about things like, I understand there's constraints, and in every negotiation there's going to be discussions and compromises, but we have to get to a place where we're comfortable and we've reached a consensus about the value I'm providing for the compensation I'm receiving. So when we think about strategies for tackling conversations, I like to kind of run through 5 strategies in my mind before I enter these that helps me get prepared so I'm more comfortable. The first one is to remember that we're all here to share some value. And we're all here for a reason. Why am I here? Why am I in this industry? Why am I choosing to do this work? Obviously, I'm really good at it and I really like it. So if I'm here with purpose and passion, that's important. And it leads us to the second place of finding your own unique voice to communicate. A lot of people ask me, what's the best style of leadership? What's the best style of communication? That's a personal answer depending on you. We all have our own unique ways to communicate that are effective for us, and we need to leverage those unique ways. So if you try and kind of impersonate someone else, it's not necessarily going to be right. You need to be authentic with your own style. The third thing is the we. In every situation, if we've got 2 people or 2,000 people in the discussion, it's not just about what I want. It's about what we need as a group. And so when we talk a little bit about, hey, how do I raise something if I'm uncomfortable? Or what if this situation needs to be spoken about, but I'm a little bit nervous to bring it up? Well, is it better for the group if we know about it? Yes, right? If it's better for the group of us to share and to be aware of this collectively, then that's helpful. That's good information to bring. If you're coming to a discussion, though, and you're only thinking about it from a one-sided perspective, what do I want, how am I going to get it, and you're not considering what the group needs, that's going to put you at a disadvantage in that conversation. The fourth bit is how you're communicating to effectively inspire the people around you. Now, I know that this is a little bit difficult in our industry because we've got a lot of creative and technical geniuses, and communication isn't always their superpower. And that's okay, because there are people who have communication as their superpower and you can talk to them. And you have to remember that getting some help to figure this out and figure out your voice and your style is important. And remembering, again, like the we and the constraints that are present in a lot of situations. In every project that we're all going to work on in our careers, there are time constraints, resource constraints, budget constraints. Sue, as a supervisor, she doesn't have to worry about those, but she has a producer who will worry about those for her. So you have to remember that with the things that are present, what is it that you control? You control how you show up. You control how you influence your team. You control how you present your message. You might not be in charge of the budget. You might not be in charge of how other people are going to react, but you're in charge of how you come to the table. And the fifth thing is sharing your value. Everybody brings something unique to the table. Everybody brings something really valuable. So again, as a business leader, we don't bring people into teams for fun, right? We bring people into teams because we need them. We need the value, we need the contributions. And if you come to the table and you don't share what you have to offer, again, as I mentioned earlier, you're doing a disservice to yourself and to your team. So if you take nothing else away from this talk today that I've done, please remember, we've all got unique value. And as has been discussed today, the diversity is part of our superpowers. It's not something we want to hide. It's not something we want to gloss over. We want to come from a place of strength. And that comes from all of our unique experiences and culture and abilities. So please make sure you share that. Thank you so much.
Just a few moments. Does anyone in the audience have a question? Ready, prepared? Yes.
Not surprising.
Our friend
Have your
Danielle.
question.
So I have kind of like maybe an example. I really like what you said about kind of understanding the value that we bring, thinking of the we, and then getting out of that comfort zone. So I guess a scenario would be when I've gone to negotiate, say with a producer, be like, hey, I'd like to negotiate a raise, and then they'd be like, oh, we'd love to give you one, but like it's like not in the production budget. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because it's like, oh, I'm considering the we of production and like, okay, maybe there's not enough money, but then in that case, it's a thing where I've kind of fallen to that kind of congeniality of like, I tried, okay, bye. What do you recommend in that case?
Good point. So, I think that it's important to keep in mind negotiation and a bit more of a holistic approach to things. So say for example, you've got your mind set on $5,000 and you go into the discussion, you say, I want $5,000, and we say it's not in the budget, and then you're like, okay, well, I'm done, now what am I gonna do? So what we wanna think about sometimes is how can I be a little bit more holistic about this? When we're talking about compensation and our careers, maybe there are other things that are important to us. Maybe it's time off, maybe it's an assignment on the next project that we're really interested, maybe it's in learning and development opportunities or able to come to events like this. So keep in mind other things that can be beneficial and valuable to you, because I certainly know from producers and HR execs and studio heads, we do run out of money very quickly. You can thank Sue for that, because it's usually the supervisor But jokes aside, there are very real constraints on actual cash, but there are other things that we can do, and sometimes even as leaders of businesses, we're not always thinking about what those other things are that we can do. Ollie mentioned, you would always hope that your managers are coming to offer you value, but sometimes they're just really busy getting yelled at by a client and they haven't been able to figure that out yet. So help in that discussion and say, hey, okay, great, if we can't do this, could we do this? Or what other things are important to me in our careers? Because I think too, it's not just about the money, right? We could choose lots of things to do for money. We're choosing these jobs that we're in for a reason. So there might be a way to broaden your skills and your, your value, what's valuable to you through other options.
Any more questions out there? Because I've got one.
Why do I keep letting you see questions?
No, I'm going to put a question to you that, and the whole audience actually, that came back to me when I was doing a presentation at Lost Boys, actually, a school that teaches visual effects. And I'd spoken about a similar kind of subject, and I'd said about, please be aware when you're in a room, if you're talking over another woman, speak up for somebody else, and just be aware that that person who could just be generally quiet, hasn't said anything, but open the room up so that you can get everyone talking. And we got joking about mansplaining. And one of the guys said, how should I react when I see somebody being bullied? And he used this example of a VFX supervisor. When a VFX supervisor, I think is being unfair to somebody in the team, like to a woman, like, what can I do? Because I'm actually too scared to speak up and say anything in fear of repercussions for that guy. And I just thought, bloody hell, that's a brilliant question, and I don't know what the answer is. So I'm going to throw that one at you. Oh, it's mean of me.
Well, that's okay because she knows that I've dealt with some kind of bullying supervisors. So I think that there's two ways to go about this. I'm going to tell you how I would deal with it if I see it happen, and then I can tell you how you could deal with it if you're not super confident enough to jump in. So I've sat in reviews with supervisors before who are just at the end of their rope and they're being super aggressive in their communication style, simply because at this stage they're so frustrated by getting yelled at by the clients, okay? So don't ever think that the supervisors are just being mean to you for fun. There's a lot of trickle down that happens in our industry. And so what I can do in that situation where I have a relationship with somebody is I can say, hey, do we need coffee? Or you can add a little bit of humor into it. If I get you a cookie, will you calm down? This isn't the end of the world, let's find a way around it. And so I can jump in because I've got a relationship with that person. And that can often be the job of a producer or maybe a CG soup or somebody else who's within the mix of the supervisor who can help calm the nerves in the situation. The other thing that you can do, and I beg of you to do this, is if you're in a situation and you're sitting in a review and it's not going well, and instead of suffer in silence with just a couple of you and the artists who are struggling through this, let somebody know who can help. And so if, I've heard about this a few times and somebody once said like, well, Jenny doesn't do anything about this guy. I'm like, where was Jenny? Not anywhere near this meeting.
Yeah.
I can only help you with the things I know about. And so you have to take the responsibility to make sure that if there's uncomfortable situations and you're not the person to help alleviate it, that you're interacting with somebody who can help. And I think that that's really important. And again, bringing it up in a way that is constructive and for the benefit of the greater group. Not just, hey, this guy's a dick. Okay, well, I got stuff to do. What do you want me to do? Like being constructive and being useful about, we really all want to get the same result. How do we more successfully navigate this conversation?
That's a good one. I think I answered similarly with try and make a joke about it. But my point, I guess, is that it goes back onto you to always try and solve the situation. And so really, I completely agree. And what we're doing by a forum like this is to, again, just be aware of when it happens, and when you see it happening to somebody else, maybe go back out to them afterwards and say, hey, I saw this, I felt for you in that experience, and then the next time, maybe you'll have a stronger voice when that happens. Hi.
So I just wanted to add to that, I would say too, don't be afraid to follow up, because we sometimes get it, I work in artist management, and we sometimes get it where someone says, oh, well, I brought this up, and it's like, oh, I thought that was resolved, I didn't realize this was still going. So don't be afraid to reach out to me. Hey, I'm still seeing this, where are we at with it? Please do.
Because we're all collaborating to come up with the best results, the best finished product, and we all want to do a good job at it. And sometimes we just don't always have the skills to do that, and so people do need help to be notified when it's not effective.
Yeah.
So, like in your experience, you were saying you got this job or you had more responsibilities and you actually didn't get the more money or anything. How can you go back? Like, how can you circle back?
I did circle back.
Okay.
I did circle back, and again, being prepared with being able to talk about what you have to offer and how industry rates work and how your experience or your unique qualifications fit into what you've been asked to do, and also being receptive to some creative problem solving or creative negotiations for things that you could get instead of maybe specifically what you asked for, but broadening the scope of your total compensation.
I thought of another difficult one for you. When you just said about bans for employment for wages, I've often wondered, being a female VFX supervisor, whether the guys are getting paid more than me. I'm too scared to ask, because if they are, I'll just want to curl up in a ball and die. But that's not the point, right? The point would be, like, I would like to walk into a review about my wages and say, I would just like you to pay me fairly. Like, whatever the guys are getting paid, you know, I know experience has a lot to do with it, but are there any key words that one could use that really imply that's what I'm asking you, without putting the whinge voice on? Why aren't I getting paid as much as them? Because then it can become back down to the individual. They might say, well, you haven't had as much experience, or...
So, I do know some stuff, and I will say that there are definitely some getting paid less because they're not very good. So, no, this is the thing. I think what you have to keep in mind a little bit is in situations where you have a big show with a big responsibility and a big client-facing perspective and things like that, you're going to be in a different pay bracket than you would be if you're on a small show with a small crew with limited client-facing interactions. And I know that's not super specific, but it's trying to keep in mind that if you're coming in to do a really large show, the budget is in line with, hopefully, let's hope the budgets are in line, with a larger salary budget for supervisors, producers, and crews. If you're coming into a very small show, then you're likely facing smaller budgets. And I think that that's really good sometimes too, because working on small shows, or small projects or small games, you have the opportunity to get involved and learn a lot more sometimes than you do on bigger shows, right? Bigger shows, bigger crews, everybody's well divided with their responsibilities. Smaller shows, you're getting more experience and more opportunity. So I think what you want to do is keep in mind too that it's not just always the cash. Sometimes it's the learning opportunity, and sometimes you do want to take on a job that's maybe not going to be the most high paying, but is going to be really beneficial to your learning curve. And I think for us as, you know, people continuing to develop in our career, maybe don't look at it just from your own history, like, okay, well, is this a good number, or should I be asking more, should I be asking less? It's like, well, where is a natural progression for somebody who's done, you know, if I've done one show, then I'm worth X, and if I've done 20 shows, then I'm worth Y, and I've certainly heard lots of people during their first show tell me that their shot got approved, and so they're gonna go ahead and need a raise. See that shot? It was so good. I'm gonna need more money. But, you know, jokes aside, is that as you're progressing, you are gaining skills and being more efficient in running your teams better and having better representation with clients. And you can hopefully make things go smoother on a lot of levels, which creates efficiencies, which in theory should translate into having more money in the budget to generally buy pizza, in my experience. But so keep that in mind, is if you're progressing well and getting better at delivering shows. Now, if you're getting worse at delivering shows, then that's a different meeting. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I'll meet you outside.
But as you're progressing, try and work that into the conversation where you're offering the additional value that you have through your extensive experience.
Jenny Rogers, everyone. Thank you very much.